You are listening to the Knightline Sports Network, brought to you by Travis Dever and the Dever team, 386-690-1636.
Knightline is brought to you by the Dever team, your source for New Smyrna Beach real estate and everything else New Smyrna Beach. Go to www.thedeverteam.com and call UCF alumni Travis Dever for all your New Smyrna Beach needs. 386-690-1636. That's 386-690-1636.
Welcome to UCF Knightline, your source for UCF sports and former player information.
All right, hello, Knight Nation. This is Andrew Phegley coming to you from the 1148 studios, and this is Knightline 251 from the award-winning Knightline Sports Network. Joining me, as always,
Roger Phipps, and on this week's show, 4 stars galore, filling out the staff. Hawaii Pipeline is wide open. Eric Lopez talks softball. We're finally talking baseball. The Tijuana Flats Hot Take of the Week, and your questions on Ask Knightline.
All righty. Speaking of your questions on Ask Knightline, I'm going to do something a little bit different. And I think I'm going to do this. We'll see how it works, but I think I'm going to do this from now on. We're going to do Ask Knightline now. We're not going to wait, because I think that since people ask these questions, we're going to talk about the stuff anyway, that we might as well get those questions out. We'll talk about the stuff instead of being at the end of the show and then we've already talked about everything. Yeah, well, we talked about that before, so I just feel like if people are going to interact with us, then we should get to their questions first.
Yeah, and
it kind of set the tone.
One of the things we ask of you is to interact and help us guide the show. So this is going to help us guide the show going forward. So we're going to take your questions and inject that into the show directly. So make sure you're participating.
And Knightline is the people's champion of UCF podcasts.
I like that.
There you go. It just came to my head. So we are the people's champion. And we want to, I love it when people interact. So we need to, I felt like this was important to put this now. So we will play our little intro and we'll get to that now. Ask a Knightline is brought to you by Chad Barr Law. Chad is a UCF alumnus and diehard Knights fan. Chad Barr Law handles auto accident, slip and fall, and personal injury cases. Call Chad today at 407-599-9036 for a free consultation. That's 407-599-9036. Armor up and call Chad Barr Law today. Alrighty, thank you, Chad Barr Law. Our first question this week is from Tony C. at Kilotone 407. What do you think about all the new coaches hired for football? Well, we were going to talk about this anyway. So I guess we'll jump right into that. And these answers are going to be a little bit longer since we're starting off the show with this, because we'll just go ahead and talk about it. So we will do it question by question, though. So
yeah, I was going to say that's a huge question because we hired a bunch of staff in the past week. So I don't know. Do you think it would be easier just to kind of talk about each one? But I just in general, I want to say this. My big takeaway after going through and researching them and kind of looking at their bios and things, there's a lot of experience here, not just with Gus, but just in general. There's a lot of experience. So when not just G5 programs, but P5 programs as well. So when we're looking at this
and
stuff,
high school as well, which is a big deal.
Yeah, and Gus, having been a high school coach before he got into college football, I think there's definitely a connection there, and especially when we're talking about recruiting connections, because there's recent connections there in the local high school, South Florida, a few other places. So, for me, what do I think? I'm excited because I'm looking at a staff that not only has ties to Gus, so he knows who they are and whether they're successful or not, but more importantly, they have ties to the rest of college football and really have a lot of experience that they're bringing to bear instead of just, again, this history that we've had of bringing young guns in and kind of teething at UCF. It's just the opposite.
absolutely just the opposite. And I love that fact, actually, that it's the opposite, because a lot of those guys go away quickly. Some of these guys are young and they're starting off. They've obviously been other places. I don't think there's a coach on the roster that hasn't been anywhere else. But I think that these guys, may want to stick around a little bit as well, at least to cut their teeth, and everything else, and get known from being at UCF. I think that there are eyes on some of these guys that may not have been there before. And I like I mentioned earlier, the high school coaches. That's really, really important. If you heard Gus Malzahn talk about it this week, having those high school coaches really helps in a bunch of different ways. One of the things is obviously, since they were just high school coaches not too horribly long ago, or they were a high school coach at one time, they know a bunch of other high school coaches. And also know how to communicate a little bit better with this generation of kids.
I think that's key. I mean, when you're talking about, when you were going through that, I was thinking about these guys are fresh out of high school. Those folks, a lot of college players go directly into, graduate assistant jobs or whatever, and then they become analysts, and then they move their way up the chain. But they haven't been in high schools and understand, what the coaches can go through. So it's not just about connecting with the kids, but also connecting with those coaches and understanding where they're coming from and trying to place their kids wherever they are. So it's not just knowing the local coaches themselves, but actually how to talk to them, what their challenges are, what UCF can bring that's different than everybody else that's beating down their door, because they're everywhere. So, bringing high school guys in and guys who've taken the same and walked that path, I think gives them some credibility when they're walking through that door trying to offer recruits.
Yeah, especially the guy, I think that's the real important one here is Tim Harris Jr., the guy that was the Booker T. Washington High School offensive coordinator and head coach, and that was, as he was there from 2009 to 2014, so it was not that long ago, and then he's been at FIU ever since. But a guy like that still knows, some of these players, still knows their brothers, and their cousins and everybody else. So that guy's, I guarantee you, he's still connected with what's going on in high school football in Miami as well.
He's never been out of South Florida.
Right.
I mean, even in college, he went to FIU, so he went straight from Booker T. Washington. His coaching, or not his coaching, but his family is actually very well known in the area for the coaching community. And like you said, that he went straight from high school to 7 seasons at FIU, and he moved his way up from there. So he's very well connected in the community. We talked about Randy Shannon and our expectations for Randy Shannon and his presence within the South Florida community. I think, and everything that I've read about Tim Harris Jr., he's actually more valuable than Randy Shannon in South Florida. So,
and that's what, that's what people are saying. So we'll see. I don't doubt it, but we'll see, I guess. We'll see what happens with the recruiting. And we'll talk even more about that later. I don't want to get into a huge spiel on recruiting because that's another giant topic of this show. So
I do want to say this. He was the #1 recruiter for Conference USA last year. So, when we're talking about getting different parts and pieces, Gus, I think, has been very strategic in getting places to help us with recruiting, people to help us with fundamentals, people who've got a lot of experience. A lot of these guys, as we go through these, you'll see they're either co-offensive coordinators or co-defensive coordinators or offensive coordinators. Yeah. So there's a lot of experience there, and they've done that job. So even if it's at like a G5 level in a lower school, right, we're getting the offensive coordinators and defensive coordinators from other G5 schools that have experience in them. They're coming to us as either co's or other roles within UCF. So I think that even speaks to the program itself, but really Gus has been very strategic about who he's picked up and brought into the staff.
Absolutely. So we were already talking about a offensive coordinator. So let's talk about the other offensive coordinator as well. There's 2. There's co-offensive coordinator. There's not one guy that's doing it. These guys both have their positions, and it looks like Gus Malzahn he put the staff together really fast, by the way, like 9 days put the staff together. So, and with the amount of experience that this staff has in putting it together that fast, he said earlier in the week he had his first like spring football press conference, official as the coach instead of like just being introduced, and he said that he focused on building a team with experience fast, and he said he had like 1,100 text messages from different coaches, anywhere from high school to the NFL, that wanted to be involved. So I knew that there was not going to be a shortage of people that he could pick from, and I think UCF knew that as well when they hired him. Obviously, he's been in the game for a long time. He's very well connected, and all of this stuff, especially being such a short time, normally a long time ago you've had your head coach hired. This doesn't happen very often at this time, so.
And it's late.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah,
one thing people don't realize is like, a lot of these guys, and you look at Williams, you look at some of the other guys, Williams told a story where he was on his way to South Florida in Miami and actually got a call from Gus and turned around. He hadn't quite gotten to Miami yet, drove another 3 hours back up north to talk to Gus. And this is what you're getting from this guy, and that's the presence in the aura. And we've kind of talked about it the last couple of weeks, but you've got a guy that has that type of pull within the industry that he's pulling people away from other jobs that they just took. So
yeah, speaking of the late start, and since we're talking about all this, I'm gonna work clips into these questions as well, because it'll just allow us to get those in there. Listen to this clip real quick about the challenges, I guess, I should say, the challenges of starting late, since we're talking about this.
That's really the biggest challenge is time. And I'll say this too, it's hard to hire a staff this late. A lot of guys have already moved or just got to where they're at. They're not wanting to move again. Their wives not wanting to move again. A lot of people just signed contract extensions with buyouts. So for us to put this staff together, I was very encouraged. And, you look at it, and I thought about splitting up spring practice with spring break, but just really felt strong. Let's just hit the ground running. Let's go 4 straight weeks or whatever for spring, and let's evaluate what we have, what we don't have, what our strengths are, what our weaknesses are, and then get going recruiting. Because, in the first presser, I said, we're going to recruit the state like nobody's ever done it. That's not recruiting talk. That's really going to happen. So we have to really get things going and develop these relationships. And so, there's, like I told the staff yesterday, there's not going to be a whole lot of sleep. We're going to have a get her done mentality.
All right. I love to listen to him. I already love to listen to him. He answers questions, and he does it, good. And he sounds like an old football coach, and he is. So the old ball coach is back. I am happy that we have a coach. I've said it before. I'll say it again. I'm happy that we have a coach with as much experience as him, and is not a young gun personally. So, all right, the next guy I guess we want to talk about, we never really got to him. I was trying to go to the co-offensive coordinator, G.J. Kinney. Interesting guy here. He was a quarterback at Tulsa, which we had a little bit of issues with, obviously, at that point as well. So
we're still having Tulsa issues.
Always had Tulsa issues. So he's been a quarterback in the Conference USA, in America. I don't know if he was an American. He probably was, as well as a coach for SMU. For 1 year, graduate assistant there, then went into Arkansas, then went to the Philadelphia Eagles, and then to Hawaii University. So he knows what it's like to live in Hawaii, which is really good for our Hawaiian players. Maybe we can get some Hawaiian staff too. You never know. We'll take any Hawaiian pipeline. I think that we
just
can
keep them coming. Put them on an airplane.
And they offered a couple this last week. They offered a couple more Hawaiian guys. Re-offered one of them that I guess got cut loose during the last moments of Heupel's tenure here. But anyway, this guy is a young guy. I think that he can do well with Dylan Gabriel. Has a little bit of a Hawaii connection with him, but also has a connection with I've played in this conference, or in the former conference that we were in. I've played these teams. He knows these teams. He played at Tulsa. He coached at SMU, so he has experience that isn't that far away from now. You know what I'm saying? Not that old.
Well, and he also played in Gus's offense. Right, so that was the big part of it. You know what I mean?
He knows Gus's
offense and scheme from a player level. So I think that'll help transition, and he's going to be focusing on quarterbacks.
Played for Gus when Gus was the offensive coordinator at Tulsa.
Correct. And, he's another guy that kind of worked his way up. He went back and forth. He played Canadian football, which I know you enjoy. He also played Arena League football, which you've got a little bit of experience with.
It was not fun. Not fun.
So now he's kind of settled on the coaching world, and he actually was, again, we were talking about these offensive coordinators, right? He was at Hawaii as an offensive coordinator. So he was there for the last year as a position coach and offensive coordinator, and he knows that local area. And he actually, the two aforementioned players, and we'll talk about it a little later, he has a connection with them in the local community, as tight-knit as they are. So that's super important for us.
Yeah, this is the guy that is going to be coaching Dylan Gabriel and the other quarterbacks. So he's played in the system, and he can, firsthand tell you what it's like and know what it's like to play in this coach's system, which is pretty rare in a lot of systems to have a guy that has actually played in the system. It's evolved since Gus Malzahn was at Tulsa, obviously, but the basics of it, I'm sure, are still the same.
First team to have 5,000 yards in a season at that time.
Yeah, absolutely. And they had 3,000-yard receivers and 1,000-yard running back?
Yep.
2,000-yard running
Two,
backs.
I think.
It was crazy. So, yeah.
You wanted offense, you got offense, and this guy knew how to run it.
Absolutely. Gus Malzahn actually talked about that offense and what the learning curve was going to be like earlier this week as well.
There's going to be a learning curve, there's no doubt, but there's going to be a lot of similarities too. We're going to play fast. We're going to be balanced. I love throwing the ball vertically down the field. And, this spring is really, we're going to put in our foundation of our offense. But we're going to be evaluating our strengths, our weaknesses. We're going to build around our strengths and build around the strengths of our quarterback too. So, that there definitely can be some things that we've been successful with in the past that you continue to see.
All right. And then obviously, he's seen Dylan Gabriel a lot. He talked about that as well in the presser and saying, I think I have a clip later on that has that in it, but he says that he's seen Dylan Gabriel. He knows what he's capable of. It's not like he wasn't watching college football when he was up there at Auburn. He obviously was. So I would assume that there's going to be, he's going to play to Dylan Gabriel's strengths. And I think Dylan Gabriel is going to do really well in this system. Anyway. Okay, so we talked about Tim Harris. We talked about G.J. Kinney. Wide receivers coach, Darryl Wyatt. We're familiar with him. He's been here for a while. He came with Heupel, and he's been here, and he's still here.
Yep.
So, but this guy has tons and tons and tons of experience. And I forgot that he was on the staff. I forgot that this guy
well, I think we were all starting to forget. I even mentioned it, I think, in one of our previous shows that there was a rift between him and Coach Heupel. And the thought was that he was not going to be retained, and then Coach left. So the interesting thing about this is he also has ties to Gus and Timo from Arkansas State. So he was there and also did well and knew Timo pretty well. So it's interesting that they've retained him.
Well, he coached, with Terry Mahajer at Kansas.
Yep.
And with David Gibbs at Kansas. So that's a big deal. He was at Kansas 2 or 3 different times, to be honest with you. 3 times, I believe. being associate head coach, offensive coordinator, wide receivers in 2000. And then 2010 co-offensive coordinator and wide receivers. So he's been all over the place. Started at community colleges, then went to Sam Houston State, Wyoming, Baylor, Tampa Bay, Kansas, Denver Broncos, Kansas, Oklahoma State, Oklahoma, Philadelphia Eagles, Minnesota Vikings, Arizona, Southern Miss, Kansas again, Texas, Texas again, with a different name, I guess, or a different position. Oklahoma State, Houston in 2016, recruiting coordinator and wide receivers coach. Arkansas State, offensive assistant, and now UCF wide receivers in 2 different staffs. So this guy, I think, is really important. You saw, I think you saw a real improvement with our receivers while he was here.
Well, I mean, we had a soccer player that was one of our starting receivers this past year. And
who was that?
You always get me with this.
Well, I mean, if you're bringing it up.
Yeah.
Was it like Alex Harris or one of those guys?
Yes.
Okay. That's what I thought. But I just put you on the spot. But that's okay. That's what I do.
Yeah, that's all right. It gives a chuckle to everybody out there.
Well,
in
and
Nation.
it teaches you to be prepared for the
Are you
question
telling
out
me?
of left field. I'm just saying, be prepared for that question because I will ask it. Anyway, Marlon Williams. I mean, the improvement and really the way that he played this year was incredible. I mean, we knew that he had it. Obviously, we knew that, but we didn't know that he had it like that. I don't think anybody knew that he was going to be that good this year. Also, we didn't know that he was going to be thrown into that starting main
role
guy because when Nixon went down. So, but I think he did a great job with Marlon Williams especially. So, I'm happy that he stayed. Who knows he's been a lot of places. I mean, I listed him. He may have some issues getting along with people if he's been that many places. You never know. But Gus Malzahn obviously knew that he or Terry Mahaja or whoever made this happen knows that he knows what he's doing and knows that he should be here. So sometimes some of the best people don't get along with everyone. I mean, I don't get along with a lot of people.
Are you saying you're one of the best people?
Well, I don't get along with a lot of people, but I do what I do pretty good, I think.
Yes, you do.
So, sometimes you kind of have to look away from somebody's attitude or their personality or whatever and just say, hey, you know what? I don't particularly like this guy, but he's good at what he does. So we're keeping him. And I think that's probably what happened if that's the case.
Yeah, I would say so as well, because it certainly, everything we had heard, it looked like he wasn't going to be rejoining the staff.
And he's the only one.
Yeah, and it sounds like David Gibbs, if David Gibbs knows him, he's vouched for him, Timo knows him, so I'm sure Gus is a good enough. One of the things you've always heard about Gus is he's a good leader of people, so hopefully he'll get him to buy in if there were any issues before and get the best out of him.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so he's wide receivers. Let's see here. Offensive line, Herb Hand.
This is a mile long. My notes for this guy are literally a page and a half.
And he has been in the game a long, long time. I think this is one of those guys that we're lucky to have a guy like this guy. With the experience that he has, yes, he's older, but you're going to have to get over the coaches being a little bit older because these guys are the ones with the experience. He worked with Gus Malzahn in 2007 and 2008 there at Tulsa, but he started off in 1991. That's the year that I graduated high school, by the way, West Virginia, Wesleyan. That's obviously a small school. Glenville State, Concord College, Clemson, West Virginia, Tulsa, Vanderbilt, Penn State, Auburn, Texas, and UCF. He comes to us from Texas, where he was currently the co-offensive coordinator and offensive line coach, and he's been the offensive line guy for quite a while at a lot of these places. So glad to have him there. I think Gus Malzahn understands, obviously, how important the offensive line is. If you can get the most experienced guy as an offensive line coach, I think that's one of the absolute most important spots to, be able to teach those guys what and really, get them to do the right thing. Because Gus Malzahn, you're going to see our offensive linemen do some stuff that Heupel did not have them do.
Yeah.
Definitely a little bit different.
On our offensive line, in general, it goes all the way back to the George O'Leary years, right? So, and you saw it with our defenses, right? What we were trying to do last year, the year before, we were trying to pressure a quarterback. So you got to stop and give Dylan time to be able to go through his reads and progressions and all of those things. And it also sets up the motion that Gus likes to use in the backfield. So offensive line, it all starts in the trenches. Your skills guys can get in space. They're going to beat guys, but it starts in the trenches. And with him, as you mentioned, he started in 2007. He was actually co-offensive coordinator with Gus Malzahn at Tulsa. When he then went to Vanderbilt, which he was with James Franklin. So he learned, and he was learning and worked with James Franklin. And then after Franklin left, he thought enough of him to take him with him to Penn State. And we all know how well Penn State did after Franklin got there and he got them going. So that was exciting. And then he went to Auburn with Gus. So Gus knows him really well. Texas, if you actually start digging into some of that, he was actually well thought of as Texas's offensive line coach. So it's not like he was doing a bad job. He was working with Tom Herman, and then Tom Herman left. And then, just like any other coaching turnover, when you have assistants, a lot of head coaches like to bring their own people in, especially when you're dealing with big-time boosters like that are like, just burn it all down and start from scratch, right? So he comes to us with a ton of experience. He's worked with Franklin, which is phenomenal. He's worked with Gus a few times. He's worked with Todd Graham, who was also a successful head coach. And so I feel like this is definitely going to be a hand up. My dad joke of the night for us in the offensive line, because that's an area that we definitely needed some work in. And we've got all of our offensive linemen coming back. So that means an immediate, our starters are coming back, which means we have the potential to have an immediate impact. There's not going to be as much of a learning curve for these guys to learn this new offense. So that's phenomenal.
All right, let's move on to Brian Blackman, who is the special teams coordinator and tight ends. The tight end part obviously has to do with offense. So this guy is from Opelika, Alabama High School, there as the offensive coordinator, then the head coach, and then in 2017 went to Auburn as an assistant offensive analyst, and then went to Troy with tight ends and S-backs, and then running backs and special teams coordinator there, and then special teams coordinator there before he came here. So he's got special teams and tight ends. Obviously, he knows, and Gus Malzahn knows him. So, that's good. We obviously need to work a little bit on special teams. I don't know at Troy what they did. Maybe you know how they did on special teams, and tight ends, obviously, there. So,
well, here's a couple of things that are important, right? So in Gus's offense, tight ends and where they block are going to be extremely important. And he also does use them occasionally in the middle of the field. So with that, it's going to be extremely important. Blackman did coach tight ends and special teams at Troy. Troy actually led the nation in special teams in 2018.
Well,
so clearly he's doing something right. Versus what we had before. You've been clamoring for a new coach. Nick Toth is no longer on the staff. And with those kind of credentials, I expect a lot of big things.
And another guy that was a high school coach from 1996 to 2016 at Opelika High School in Alabama. That's a long time to be a high school coach, 96 to 2016. So this is one of those guys that knows, developing and stuff like that as well. So with our tight ends, we are absolutely freaking loaded at tight ends. Really some big athletic guys, but Heupel never really used them the way that we thought that he would. I've been saying that since the beginning, Just like, why aren't we using these tight ends?
'Cause he
We've
did
got
at
all
Mizzou.
these tight ends. Yeah. I was shocked that he didn't. But anyway, we got all these tight ends. This guy is a tight ends coach, special teams as well. So that's good. Let's continue with Travis Williams, who is the defensive coordinator. We know that this was a big thing that we were all wishing for, a new defensive coordinator. Well, we got one. And we have a co-defensive coordinator as well. Travis Williams, though, former Auburn co-defensive coordinator as well, linebacker coach, recruiting coordinator. Also played for Gus Malzahn. Doesn't have a huge list on the website here for UCF as to where he's been, but he's been with Gus Malzahn for a little while, and then I know that he had taken the linebacker coach job at Miami just recently before he came here. So go ahead if you have something on him.
Yeah, this guy's known, first of all, he's a rising star in the coaching community. Now, you heard Gus talk about it, but it's also been known that he is a huge deal, partly because he recruits like his hair's on fire. He's super energetic. He's super positive. He was famous for putting out that rap video on the Tiger Walk, and it was good enough that Auburn actually bought it and plays it at their games. But that's the kind of guy he is. He takes that energy, and he did say this week that he's going to be on the sideline as opposed to in the box. He likes to have that energy, and I feel like that's something that was missing on the sidelines these past few years. So, as you said, he worked with Gus in the past. He was a graduate assistant and was actually interesting how his career path kind of developed with Gus by being given opportunities like that. Following the 2011 season, he actually left Auburn to coach Northern Iowa as the linebackers coach, so he did have a stint there. Then he went into high school again. He was a defensive coordinator at Creekside High School for 2013 and back to Auburn in 2014, and then he was promoted there within and went to Miami.
All righty. Well, he's here now, so that's exciting to have a new defensive coordinator with all the issues that we had on defense. So our defense is young, and hopefully these guys can get that going a lot better than it was before. Even though our stats looked pretty good. Our stats did look pretty good, except for especially that last game. But that showed you kind of how the defense was going without some big-time guys in there in that game for BYU for the bowl game. So, all right, let's move on to David Gibbs. And we're going to talk about a couple more guys, and then we're going to move on because, I mean, we could bore you and talk about every single one of these guys, but we're going to talk about all these guys at some point later on anyway. So we'll talk about David Gibbs, though, a guy that I kind of know, who was my position coach at Kansas, 95 to 96, 2 years, my last 2 years of playing there. I haven't talked to the guy in a long, long time, and I really haven't watched too much of what he's done, but he's been around. He was a graduate assistant at Oklahoma in 91, 92, which 93, 94 at Colorado as a graduate assistant, and then came to Kansas 95 to 96. Then went to Minnesota with my former head coach as well, as his defensive coordinator from 97 to 2000. Then got picked up by the Denver Broncos, then to Auburn with Gus, I believe, or maybe that was before Gus was there actually at Auburn, 2005. Then to Kansas City Chiefs, defensive backs from 2006 to 2008. So I did obviously see what he was doing there. Pretty good years. And then 2009, 2010, the Houston Texans. And then 2012, the Virginia Destroyers. It was the UFL. And then 2013-14, Houston, the defensive coordinator. So we've seen, if you've obviously been following UCF football, you've seen us play against his defenses before. And he was the interim head coach for the Armed Forces Bowl in 2014 with Houston. Then he went to Texas Tech as the defensive coordinator. And then Missouri as the defensive back. So he was actually there when Heupel was there, I believe, for a year, possibly. And then UCF. So I know that this guy he was a very young coach when I knew him. So I don't know if he coaches the same way. He probably does. He was kind of a hard-nosed guy because my head coach was a hard-nosed guy, Glenn Mason. So I don't know if he's still like that or not, but it'll be interesting to see. I believe that he will be on the field as well. I think he's a field guy. He always was with us. So I know that he will hold these guys accountable, though. And that's the biggest thing. He always held us accountable to what we did on the football field and off the football field. So, that's a good thing. And we'll see what happens. Our defensive backs are a bunch of young guys. So he's the co-defensive coordinator and secondary coach. So it'll be a very important spot that he is in to get this, young defense going.
Yeah, and a cool hand and a steady hand, right? That's the most important part, especially for our defensive back unit. They're definitely young. They got some experience last year. But now they're playing in a little bit a similar defense in the sense that Gus likes to run a lot of nickel defenses, but totally new. Now, the other thing that's interesting that really jumped out to me was his time at Texas Tech, right? So Texas Tech, obviously, they're known for their air raid style offense, the Cliff Kingsbury years and all of that fun stuff. So this guy knows how to field a defense that keeps someone competitive.
I believe he was there when Patrick Mahomes was there as well.
He was. So he knows how to field a defense with an offense that plays for a lot of yards and moves quickly. So that's good experience to have, especially when you're talking about tempo style, RPO style offense that Gus likes to run. And their defenses there didn't rank as well nationally, but they kind of suffered what most defenses do, whether you're talking about Oregon's defense, whether you're talking about our defense, whether you're talking about other high tempo, fast paced defenses. Their rankings nationally aren't as high, but what you have to look at is per play and what they're giving up in that sense. And he is very well known and was very well respected at Texas Tech and was there for a long time. So, he's got NFL experience. He's got, big time football experience. So I'm excited about that. And it's interesting how Gus has kind of built this because with Travis, he's had his focus on linebackers. Now Gibbs has his focus and his strength as defensive backs. Obviously, he coached you as a defensive back. And then we have a couple of guys that are working on the defensive line and are splitting duties there as well with the ends and then the interior linemen. So it's interesting how this works, but I think it's good to have a steady hand for a group that's very, very young. Yeah,
and then Addison Williams as well is here, and he's going to be focusing on corners in particularly. So that's kind of interesting with a guy being over the secondary, but then having a coach as well with the corners who are, part of the secondary. So he was a 2010 South Carolina student assistant, 2011-12 South Carolina defensive graduate assistant, Tusculum defensive backs in 2013 through 2016 as defensive coordinator, leaving there. Then to Furman.
We hate those guys.
We hate them, but he was not there. He was there after that. So 2017 through 18 for corners, and then 2019 defensive coordinator. Then he went to Auburn with Gus as an analyst and assistant head coach. Then to Coastal Carolina last year with the safeties, and then here with the cornerbacks.
Yeah, and what's interesting about Coastal Carolina is in 2020, they ranked third nationally in interceptions with 16 and second in turnovers gained with 25. So, whenever you have a high-paced offense, you want those turnovers. We saw that with Frost. We wanted some more of that when and we did actually pretty well with stopping, opposing offenses. But those turnovers are key because you want to get the ball in in the offense's hands. They were also 16th in defending the pass. So that's extremely important when you're talking about turning the ball over and making sure that you're giving your linemen enough time to get to the quarterback. So, what we're trying to do, they're complementary. The linemen and the defensive backs are complementary, right? And the linebackers kind of play in the middle. So with those guys, it's this guy is not just someone who teaches defensive backs, but he's also someone who teaches being a ball hawk. And that's really, really important for what we're trying to do and get the ball back in the offense's hands.
Yeah, he's a former South Carolina football player, by the way, which we haven't really mentioned a lot of these guys' playing experience except the Auburn guys. Who else did you want to talk about real quick on this list of coaches, and then we'll move on to the next question?
Well, we've got Kenny Ingram that we could talk about. One of the big focuses and one of the areas that we've kind of been lacking in is the defensive line, right? And being able to get pressure from the ends and from the middle. So he's actually going to be focusing on defensive ends and rushing specifically. So what he's going to be doing, and what's interesting about this is unique from the way this coaching staff is set up, is he's going to be focused on getting pressure on the quarterback. And that's all he's going to be doing, right? He's going to be sitting there with the guys in the technique and saying, hey, listen, this is how you blow past your left tackle, your right tackle, and this is how you get to the quarterback, create that pressure for the rest of your defense so that, when you're a defensive back or whatever other position you're playing, you have opportunities to get them out of sorts and turn the ball over. So he was with Gus at Auburn. He also coached with him at Arkansas State, so there's definitely some ties there. He coached the defensive line there and ran the interior D-line for Arkansas State and defensive tackles at Arkansas in 2019. So he's got experience on the interior and the ends, but he'll be focusing on the ends for us. And he actually started in 2005 as a D-line coach. So he's got plenty of experience, 2005 to 2020. All this guy specializes in is the defensive line, and being able to focus in one area, I think that's a positive for us.
Also a high school head coach, and then 2015-16, he was the defensive line coach at Cincinnati. And then Arkansas State, Auburn, he's been around. So, and
Memphis. He was a coach linebackers as well.
Yeah, so he's been around quite a bit. And then the other Kenny.
Kenny G? No, sorry.
Well, there's Kenny Ingram and Kenny Martin. Kenny Martin is the guy that I believe, if my page would refresh here where I can get to his bio, he's the guy that's going to be coaching defensive tackles. And he is from Ocoee High School, is where he was the first to coach, co-defensive coordinator and defensive line there. Then went to Warren Central High School in Kentucky. Then to Virginia Wise University, I believe, and then Western Kentucky for the last few years, 16 through 20. Defensive graduate assistant and then defensive tackles at Western Kentucky. So I like that they're breaking that up where a guy is defensive tackles and then defensive ends. I like that. Gives those guys a little bit more, and you can develop those positions individually as individual positions instead of just a normal, D-line guy. So
the other thing too is
breaks that down a little bit.
Yeah, he's got a lot of connections in the local high schools here, so in Central Florida, and he's maintained that through where he's been. There's been a lot of conversation around him, especially at Western Kentucky. They were heavily recruiting Central Florida. We actually went after one of the more recent offers that went out was a 4-star out of Ocoee. So this guy knows the area very well, knows the high schools well, knows where to recruit, and that's going to be exciting for us.
Okay, so that's going to do it for our coaches right now. I'm sure we'll talk a lot more about this. So on to our next Ask Knightline question.
Wow.
I know. Second one here, Cape Joe, at Joe Powell A. I can't. Paola? Maybe it's Paola. At Joe Powell A. All right, well, this is going to be fun anyway because I constantly am struggling with these Twitter handles anyway and trying to figure them all out. We don't have a pronunciation guide for these, so sorry, Joe. But thank you for your question, Cape Joe. Anyway, at any risk in focusing so heavily on 4- and 5-star offers? What if it doesn't pan out? We also lose out on some high 3-stars because we weren't going hard enough after them from the get-go. I love seeing them shoot for the stars, but I'm curious if you think it could backfire. First of all, I love that we're shooting for the stars, and I think we should shoot for the stars. You ask the higher players first, and you may, if you go after enough of them, you're going to get one at some point. You know what I'm saying? I am worried a little bit about it backfiring, obviously, because you're not going to get the most of those guys. UCF just isn't known for having a bunch of 4- and 5-star guys, but I think we're going to start to be. I think you're going to see these guys a lot more. If you don't go after them, you can't get them in the first place. If you don't go after them, you're never going to land the ones that people don't think you're going to land. It's kind of like if you don't play the top 10 teams, you're not going to be able to beat them if you don't play them.
Right.
So you have to play them.
And beat them, unlike the Cows.
And beat them, yes. But you know what I'm saying there.
Yeah.
If you don't try, then you're not going to succeed. So,
well, and I'm with you on that. I think at the end of the day, the old adage, you only make shots that you actually shoot, right? So at the end of the day, I think 4- and 5-star offers are important. I think you set up your draft boards, but what I don't see, and I want to be clear about this, yes, we're seeing a lot of offers go to 4 and 5 stars. One, it's early in the recruiting cycle, so we're getting our names out there, right? It's almost like a branding thing. On top of that, we've already got some 4 stars, and when David Kelly was here, and some of you may not remember that because now it's been a while ago, and I'm starting to get more gray hair, and I didn't have any then. But at the time, David Kelly was pulling in 4 stars. So when you look at Josh Reese of the world, you look at all those folks back on that Fiesta Bowl team, that first Fiesta Bowl team, there are some 4 stars on there. And, just because we're going after and offering these 4- and 5-star guys, that doesn't mean that you stop recruiting those high 3 stars. There's been some offers that have gone out to those folks as well, and you'll see that. The other thing that's interesting to kind of note is some of the guys that we're getting on transfers that we'll talk about in a little bit, they were offered back when they chose someone else, and now they're starting to come back to us. So that relationship dynamic has completely changed. It's not just recruiting them for that 4-year window, with the players being able to transfer whenever they want without having to sit out. That's a whole new game. So I think that sets us up not just for, hey, right now, but also a year from now or 2 years from now, if someone isn't getting playing time and they want to come back home to Florida, you want to be on their radar because they'll remember you when you go back after them again the second time.
Yeah. How many days has Gus Malzahn been the head coach here at UCF?
14, 15 days,
something like that. Yeah. He's offered 76 kids by the count on UCFsports.com. Brandon has a big a list of all the players and all their Twitter announcements and all that stuff. 76 kids. That's amazing, to be honest with you.
Well, he was hitting up kids when he first got hired that
the first night.
Yeah. He was calling them from his hotel room himself without a staff.
One of the things that I've noticed, and a few other people have pointed this out as well, he's not going for really anybody that is under 5.6 or 5.5 on the list of the Rivals rank that they use for the 4 and 5 star, 3 stars, all that stuff. They're all pretty much in the 5.5 or greater, which would mean 3 star or greater. Don't see very many people here that aren't at least that. There may be a couple, but I haven't seen. So it looks like that Gus Malzahn really wants to at least stick with that as far as these guys go. So it is interesting. It'll be interesting to see how many of these guys pan out and if this philosophy works. This possibly could be the philosophy that he used before at Auburn. It's a lot easier at Auburn, obviously, to get the 4 and 5 star kids. But,
well, I mean, the SEC
doesn't mean that it can't here.
The SEC in general. I mean, you look. We've had a couple of recent SEC transfers that were 4 stars that came our way. Right at the end of the day, a lot of these bigger name schools will go out there and offer a bunch of people and either A, just let them kind of ride out and push themselves out, or B, they'll offer them a gray shirt or a blue shirt or something like that to be able to stay on the roster. So, the philosophy at an SEC type school is go get as many out there as you can, and then whittle those down and then kind of play the averages. So as people come off the board, then you move on to the next one. But have as wide a net as possible so that you can retain as many of those higher level kids that you want to get. And that's, again, it's not about stopping recruiting these other high 3-star kids. It's just setting your sights and casting a wider net, in my opinion.
Yeah, anybody in there that you want to focus on and talk about someone that you like that he's offered so far or anything?
I mean, he's been all over the place. I like personally, we talk about the Hawaiian pipeline that we've kind of established, and for me, I like to go back to that. I mean, our most recent 4-star Titus was from Hawaii, right? So Dylan Gabriel was a big time get back by Josh Heupel, and that was from KZ. So it's kind of gone from KZ coming in, then he recruited DG recruited and helped, and so did KZ from what I've heard, get Titus, and maintaining, you heard that in the press conference from Gus Malzahn, is that he wanted to maintain those relationships that were working for us. And we actually had a few offers out there for offensive linemen out in Hawaii. So he's maintained that, and we went back, and you kind of alluded to this earlier. We've got a couple of guys that are out there and here we go with the names.
Yesterday he offered 2 of them.
Yeah, so. Lakia Kapoi and Jonah Savinia. Sorry, man, if I messed that up, but
I'm sure you did.
I know I did. But Kapoi is a 4-star offensive lineman from Hawaii, right?
Savianea or something like that.
Yeah, something like that.
2 big dudes through too. 6'4", 305 and 6'4", 330. 330. That's a big dude.
Yeah, and if you look at him, I actually started looking into his tape a little bit and whatnot. He's not a 330-pound hefty guy. He's a big, strong, muscular type of guy. Now, you're going to have a little bit of girth on you at 330, but he's more in shape than most. And these guys are juniors. They're 2022 guys. So they're juniors in high school, and they're already 6'4", 300-plus for both of these guys. And that's Gus going out there and trying to establish and get those bigger offensive linemen that we need to move those piles, because we saw last year Cincinnati, Tulsa, those guys pushed us around a little bit.
Yeah, I've seen a little bit of a trend in this recruiting thing. I've kind of been following this stuff as much as I can, but quite a few players, Gus has gone out of his 6-hour window that he kept talking about. We're going to recruit within 6 hours of Orlando. Well, he's kind of out of that 6, especially with Hawaii, but lots of Texas kids that he's starting to offer. So that may come from one of those other coaches, though, that was in Texas before, obviously. So some of these kids may be Gibbs kids that he wants to recruit. So,
well, Texas has been an important source for us, and as well as Arizona. Our last 2.
Most of them are linebackers. They're defensive players that he's trying to get from Texas, it looks like. So a couple of Louisiana, Texas, Georgia. Lots of Georgia. Quite a few Texas, though. Wide receiver, running back out of Texas.
A lot of skilled players out of Texas. I mean, we got Kevon Ahmad out of there. We got a few of our wide receivers that were coming from there, because those high school football in Texas rivals Florida high school football.
Right.
I mean, it simply does. And I
personally think it's a little bit bigger in Texas.
I would agree. The stadiums are,
Florida
for sure.
Definitely keeps up with Texas, though. But yeah, some of the high school stadiums and stuff that they have there, I think one of them holds, I think it's bigger than UCF's stadium. It's a district stadium, but still, it's where the one bowl game is played out there. They play a bowl game in this high school stadium.
That should tells you something. Yeah, exactly.
It's amazing, though. And I know a couple of high school teams actually play indoors in little, not domes, but kind of arenas with a long enough field. It's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, and going back to Kapoi, just to kind of think about where we're at with that. This guy has 16 offers, did not play a junior season, because actually Hawaii had pushed back the high school season this year to the spring, and then about a week before they were due to start play for their junior season, they cut off spring football. And they said, hey, we're not playing this season at all. So these guys are sophomores, right? Now they're as sophomores. Kapoy had 16 offers. Just some big names here: Arizona, Arizona State, BYU, Cal, Indiana, Michigan, Oregon State, Syracuse, Washington State, Illinois, Wisconsin. So if you know anything about Wisconsin football, great linemen come from Wisconsin, so they obviously think highly of him as well.
Yeah, here's a guy from California as well, so he's well outside of the 6-hour window with this guy.
Well, if you fly, it's only 6 hours.
Well, that's true. That is true. Yeah, here's a C.J. Williams, wide receiver, 6'2", 193, out of Santa Ana, California. Has offers from Alabama, Arizona State, California, Georgia, LSU, Minnesota, Notre Dame, Ohio State, Stanford, USC, Washington, Wisconsin, Arizona, Arkansas, Auburn, Baylor, Florida, Florida Atlantic, Florida State, Miami, Michigan, Ole Miss, Missouri, Nebraska. I mean, he's got every offer that there is out there.
And the most important one, UCF.
Well, obviously, we wouldn't be talking about him if he didn't. But, I mean, he's literally got every offer on here. He's a 4-star. Texas, Tennessee, South Carolina, I could go on. But, I mean, we're not going to get all these kids, obviously, but we're going to get some of them. I think we'll get some of these guys. This guy's a 4-star. There's no reason why these kids wouldn't want to come here and play for Gus Malzahn.
Well, and if we don't get them this round, we'll get them the next round when they transfer if they aren't getting the playing time that they want.
Exactly. Yeah, free agency now in college football, basically. So
speaking of that, we actually got 2 really big 4-stars recently. And one of them should be pretty familiar to UCF fans. There's a kid named Nate Greg Myers, who was out of Tampa, and we were in the running for him way back when in 2016. So he was in between us and Auburn. He ended up obviously going to Auburn, but he was a 6'4". He was listed originally as 6'4", 220. He's now listed as 6'2", 205. So apparently, going from Auburn to Colorado State, he lost a couple of inches and a few pounds, which tends to happen. But he had 35 offers to begin with. He's a big play receiver. He at the time when he was being recruited, he was ranked the 35th best player in the country, 3rd in his position, and 6th in the state of Florida, which is saying a lot about him. He's a big play receiver. He was utilized underneath at his most recent stop, which is Colorado State. He transferred there in 2018, immediately after the Auburn lost to us in the Chick-fil-A Bowl. Coincidence? I don't know. But at the end of the day, I guess he was a little upset he wasn't getting as much playing time. In 2016, he had 4 receptions for 70 yards, but he averaged 17.5. 2017, which was our year to shine, 16 for 285, 17.8 yard average. Again, high average there. He played in 1 game in 2018 against Washington. He had 2 receptions for 39 yards and averaged 19.5. But then he transferred. So he sat out the rest of 2018, came back in 2019 at Colorado State, had 23 catches for 329 yards and 14.3 on his average. And then 2020 played sparingly with 6 receptions for 68 yards. So, as much of a push and as much as of a star he was coming out of high school, he hasn't really panned out as much or as well in the college ranks. So what do you think about that?
Well, you kind of have to wonder why. You know what I'm saying? He's been numerous different places. This will be his 3rd school. You kind of wonder why that's happened. Whether he is a practice player and doesn't perform on the field as well as he does in practice or vice versa. So, I mean, he's got 1 year left as a transfer? Yeah, so, I mean, we'll see. Maybe he wants to end it well, wants to get the last chance with Gus Malzahn. Gus Malzahn is obviously familiar with him. So maybe, there was some talk back and forth with those guys like, look, spend your last year with me. I'll get you back, in the spotlight or whatever. And some of these guys, you would think maybe a guy like that could come in as well and kind of tutor the younger guys as well. Not really being as much of a valuable player, but being a coach within the game for the younger receivers.
Because he's played within the system. Within
the system, exactly. So maybe that's what's going on there. You never know. If we see him, we see him. If we don't, you'll know that's probably why he was brought into the system.
Yeah, and he joins Ryan O'Keefe, Jalen Robinson, Kevon Ahmad, who kind of started to break out last year, and Deontay Marks, remember that Florida transfer that we got late last year, who was another former 4-star wide receiver, but he has a little bit more time left. So it'll be interesting to see how they slice and dice the playing time under this. But I think you're right. I mean, bringing someone on who knows the system and is able to teach that to these guys accelerates the ramp-up speed for the offense.
Absolutely. All right, let's take a break, and we'll get back to the rest of the Ask Knightline questions.
Hey, this is Travis Dever, Kai's Real Estate, the Dever team, New Smyrna Beach. Your source for real estate and everything else, New Smyrna Beach. Proud sponsor of Knightline. Call me anytime at 386-690-1636. That's 386-690-1636. Let me show you my hometown, New Smyrna Beach, UCF's favorite beach. Go Knights and charge on.
An auto accident can change your life forever. At Chad Barr Law, we are raising the bar on what to expect from your personal injury attorney. Hi, I'm Chad Barr, and I want you to know that our entire team is dedicated to providing you with the representation you deserve in your greatest time of need. If you or a loved one have been injured in an auto accident, call 407-599-9036 for a free consultation or visit chadbarlaw.com. At Chad Barr Law, our clients come to us in need and leave as family. Offices, Altamont Springs.
Looking for more out of your Porsche? Look no further than Flat6Motorsports.com. They have the widest selection of aftermarket Porsche parts anywhere in the world. With over 85 product lines and in-depth expertise, Flat6Motorsports.com is your one-stop shop for any Porsche performance needs. Whether you're shopping for intakes, exhausts, suspension, or tuning, they have you covered. Flat6Motorsports.com is the premier Porsche aftermarket specialist. Check them out at Flat6Motorsports.com. Night Nation, I need to talk to you about something very near and dear to my heart. It's Tijuana Flats' new fajita tacos, available for a limited time. Grilled chicken or steak with fajita peppers and onions, garlic lime sauce, and guajillo chili salsa. Topped with cheddar jack cheese, crisp iceberg lettuce, and fresh pico on warm flour tortillas served with chips and salsa. We're talking good vibes and even better flavors from a whole nother plane of deliciousness. Available for a limited time either in-store or through their app and website for delivery or pickup. These aren't just fajitas. They're something better. True enlightenment. Fajita tacos. Available for a limited time only at your neighborhood Tijuana Flats. All right, before we move on, we're going to go back and talk about a recruit that we didn't talk about, which we probably should have talked about. I was moving on too quickly. Go ahead, Roger, talking about that guy.
All right, so we've got Mark Anthony Richards, who's a big time deal for us. He was a 2019 prospect from West Palm Beach, Florida. 4-star, multi-purpose back with really good hands, which is important in Gus's offense. He ranked 90th nationally, so 90th best player in the country and 12th in Florida in 2019. His comparison really looks like Kerryon Johnson, which we should all be familiar with Kerryon Johnson in Auburn and what he did there. So he's really good in space and catching the ball in space. And what's important with that and what we want to stress is with Gus's, the more and more I dig into Gus's offense, he's got elements of the veer in there. He's got elements of almost an option type where he'll run a quarterback to the side and he'll have a running back running wide, and then he'll either pitch it, kind of like what Frost did with KZ there for a little while. You'd see him pitch to a couple of the different running backs, depending on what the situation was. Adrian Killen's got it a couple of times. Otis Anderson got it a couple of times. So with him, he's able to slide out into space, catch the ball. He's got great hands. He's also a solid blocker, which is important as well in some of the schemes that Gus runs. And, he's the kind of guy that has good burst and acceleration. So the big thing with that is Gus sets up a lot of zone blocking, and basically what they're trying to do is, in order to spring the running back into the secondary, he's following blockers who are going to be pushing and road grading the way that they want, and then it's important for him to bounce out and accelerate through the secondary for that extra yards. So that's super important, and he does this in spades. He played 1 year for Auburn. He had 20 attempts for 76 yards. He averaged 3.8 yards per carry. But the most important part of this is he's got 4 years of eligibility left. So he played last year, but again, remember, last year was a throwaway year. He can transfer without a penalty, without sitting. So we've basically got a high school. It's basically like having a high school kid who's got a year in Gus's system, a year in strength and conditioning at a Auburn level, SEC level program, and he's immediately eligible. So this is a big pickup for us.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I thought we had talked about him like last week or something is why I moved along. So
radio show. We talked about him on the radio show.
All right, well, cool. All right, so on to the next question here. This is from Brian Peterson, Brian W. Peterson on Twitter. Now that we have Gus as a head coach, would Mac have been a better fit at quarterback than DG, considering Malzahn's past success with bigger, mobile quarterbacks?
Ooh.
Yeah, well, I mean, I love this question, but it's also a hypothetical question. You never know. I mean, obviously, Gus has had some larger quarterbacks in his time. But you never know what he will do with a guy like DG. DG has an arm probably better than any of those quarterbacks that he's had since Cam Newton, possibly. So I don't think that he has had a guy like DG. Yes, he's smaller, and he's going to have to do a couple of things differently as far as, passing between the lanes and stuff like that. But with the arm that DG has, I think that he'll be great in Gus Malzahn's system, and I think it'll be exciting for Gus, and I know he's excited. I have clips where he talks about DG. Did I play the one earlier where he talked about him a little bit?
No, I don't think you did.
Okay, let me see if I can find it. Here we go.
Everybody's starting out new. I mean, we're going to go out there day one. I didn't want a whole lot of preconceived ideas, and we're going to see who the best is. Obviously, with Dylan, our quarterback, I'm very impressed with him, and I was very familiar even from afar with the old program. We'd watch him on TV and I just, had a lot of respect for, what he's done and all that. So, but hadn't watched a whole lot of film. Now we have watched film of our signees coming in just to make sure we're, familiar with that. But, we're going to go out and spring ball, put the ball down, see who the best is.
All right. Not exactly the way that I wanted to set that clip up, but he did talk about DG in there and knowing of him and watched him play before. He knows what he's got. It was really the point that I wanted to get across there. So, I'm excited to see what DG does. I mean, could Mac have done better? Probably. I think any quarterback could probably do better. Mackenzie Milton could probably do better in this system, to be honest with you.
Mackenzie Milton would kill it in this system.
Absolutely. Love the question. I'm not saying that I don't like the question, but, it's hard to know what DG or what DJ Mac would have done in this system. Probably would have been great, but I really think the DG is going to be awesome in this system.
Okay, so a few quick thoughts on this. One, prototypical size for a Gus Malzahn quarterback. So, yes, definitely would be that. However, Gus Malzahn has had that size quarterback, but those that have not been accurate, okay, and being able to throw when they're running bootleg or something like that, they've also been clamped down on by defenses. So when it comes to this, what I'm thinking about is we never saw the best of DJ, so we don't know what he was capable of, even in the game that he's famous for when it comes to Memphis, right? He made some mistakes. I mean, he was known for fumbling the ball when he was running as well. So we don't know, whether he would be the best, but I can say this. In the past, in Gus's offenses, yes, it's a running quarterback, but it's also someone who can throw, because if you become one-dimensional, it doesn't matter what system you run, you're going to end up with a problem. So for me, the most successful, the Cam Newtons of the world, and there was another one who I can't remember his name right now, was a quarterback who could run, was big-bodied like DJ, but they were also both accurate passers. Those that weren't accurate passers, 55%, which is kind of where DJ was, were not successful in this offense. So it'll be interesting to see how he uses DG in this particular instance, but I don't think just because he was the prototypical size and could run the ball and had good speed and could run people over doesn't necessarily mean he would have been successful in this offense.
Yeah, and I would have to go back and look through the rosters that he's had to see if he's ever had a smaller quarterback. I know that one of the guys on the team currently that he recruited is a smaller guy. And I don't think Sean White, that played for them in the 2017 season, he wasn't Jarrett Stidham by any chance, but because he was 6'2", 210. I think Sean White was a smaller guy as well. So I don't know. I mean, who knows what experience he has with a smaller quarterback, but
what he has done, though, and what you've noticed over time, is that he's adjusted his offense to the quarterback. And I went back, and thanks to Andrew for finding some of these articles, but they go back and they show how he's adjusted his offense depending on the strengths of his running back and his quarterback. And what you've found is that he's completely introduced older concepts with a new twist, depending on what the strengths of those players are. So I think, and I'll be excited to see, because I think it'll be something totally different that nobody has seen when they go back and look at old Gus Malzahn tape, because there's plenty of tape out there. So it actually may be an advantage to have Dylan out there versus someone like DJ.
Yeah, and Dylan's arm is
it's money.
It's twice as good as DJ's was. I mean, it's not even a comparison, I don't think. So, all right. Thank you, Brian, for your question. Appreciate it. Next question comes from Jessica Sheldon at UCF Nation 2004 on Twitter. Love the fire and passion Gus has for coaching. I like him as our head coach over Heupel. If Gus has 10 or more wins in the next 2 seasons, do you think he will stay? Absolutely, I do, because we've talked about this before as well. I think that he's done it all. He's done it. He has nothing else to do. He's been at the highest level. The only coaching job that would probably be better that he hasn't already had would be when Nick Saban retires at freaking Alabama. I mean, that's the only top I think that he could go to, or maybe an Ohio State or a Michigan or a Notre Dame or something like that. But I don't see him even in that position in any of those places. So the ceiling for Gus Malzahn he's already been there. He's done it. I think this is a challenge for him. I think he wants to do, obviously he's here and he wants to do this. So I think that he's a guy, and he said numerous times, if a guy would go to UCF and stick around, they could really build even more of a program than they already have. So I think that he has that in mind. I think that he wants to stay here. He wants to build this program, wants to build some coaches. The assistant coaches, especially the younger guys, those are the guys you're going to see move on. I don't think it's going to be Gus, though. I do think if he has 10 or more wins in the next 2 seasons, absolutely he will stay. And I think that we will be glad to have him, because this program will get better and better and better as a program the longer we have him.
I agree with that sentiment wholeheartedly.
Unless he comes out and absolutely sucks, but I don't think that's going to happen.
I hope not, because if not, there'd be a lot of excitement lost. But at the end of the day, this is kind of how I look at it, right? So Gus Malzahn has been paid a lot of money. Okay, so he's not hurting for that.
Yeah, money's not a factor either.
He's never had a losing season, ever. Think about that.
I think he had one at Auburn.
I don't think he did.
Okay, well, let me look.
Okay. So at the end of the day, and if you prove me right or prove me wrong, you do. But at the end of the day, the bottom line is he's been successful at Auburn. He knows what the SEC experience is. He's had a rivalry with Saban, and I agree with you, Andrew, in the point that where else is he going to go? So what I hear from Timo and what I hear from Gus Malzahn, because those guys knew each other for a long time, is how are we going to get these guys into the Power 5? I think that's his next objective, is how do we make this program and what it could be. And that's a little bit of his high school coaching coming back. He's the kind of guy that cares about players. You always hear about this from him, is caring about his players and building people. And I think he wants to do that at UCF because he sees the potential at UCF. And I think for both of them, the scheduling philosophy that they've been talking about, reaching for the stars, the specific quotes, he dropped those quotes into his presser for a reason. And I think he's here at least 5 years. And if he gets to the Power 5, I think he'll be here even longer, unless he wants to give it one more good hurrah at a higher level school to finish out his retirement. I don't see that happening with him.
Okay, he did not have a losing season. You are correct. He almost had a losing season. 2015 was not a good year. 7-6. The only reason it was a winning program is they won their bowl game. They were 2-6 in the SEC though.
Yeah,
that was bad.
Yeah. But for him, yeah.
Yeah, they won their bowl game, and I don't even know who it was against. It was the Birmingham Bowl, so it was, let me see, who was it? Auburn and Memphis, and he won 31-10 to save that as a winning season. So,
yeah, so again, I agree with Andrew.
In the SEC West is not good. So that's the worst that he's ever done. This year they were third in this last season, 2020, third in the West, and he got fired.
Yeah, and that's where they average.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
Absolutely crazy. Good for them. I'm glad they fired him because we got him now.
Yep.
So, all right, well, that's it for Ask Knightline. Very cool. I like doing that. And if we keep getting good questions and all that, we will start to show off like that because we're going to talk about the stuff anyway. And I would rather you guys kind of run what we talk about because if you're asking questions, it's what you want to hear about. So we will do that. Yeah. So, all right. Next up here are our hot takes of the week. These are good ones, too. Welcome to the Tijuana Flats Hot Take of the Week. Visit TijuanaFlats.com for takeout or delivery, or visit your local Tijuana Flats. Tex-Mex for everyone. I had some Tijuana Flats the other night, by the way, and it was absolutely awesome. I've been on a diet. I've been on a keto diet. So carbs and Mexican food especially, which is my absolute favorite, I don't get very often, especially at a restaurant. So went to Tijuana Flats, and it was absolutely awesome. Had a steak chimichanga, megawana, by the way, and some hot sauces. And I'm big into the hot sauce thing and spicy stuff. They have a new one, Mofo and Insane, and it is Carolina Reaper and habanero pepper. It's Carolina Reaper, habanero pepper, and vinegar garlic, and it is one of their own sauces, Mofo and Insane, and it is Mofo and Insane. It's awesome. It tastes good, and it's hot. So I like the Carolina Reaper stuff, by the way. Anyway, so that's kind of setting up the hot take of the week.
And it looks great. I mean, go back and take a look at the pictures.
You may have
that Andrew
seen
posted.
this on Twitter. Yeah, you may have seen what I posted. I posted a couple things on Twitter. It's making my mouth water just looking at it because I'm looking back at the picture. Anyway, my Tijuana Flats hot take of the week. We're both going to do one. Mine is UCF will have a 1,000-yard running back in 2021. I think that in Gus Malzahn's offense, He's known for having a balanced system, and one of the things that I love about his offense is if the defense is giving it, we're going to take it. It doesn't matter. He won't just throw against the team just to throw against the team. So if the pass isn't working, he's going to go on the run, and if the run's not working, he'll go back to the air. You know what I'm saying? So I don't think he's going to use a multiple running back thing too, which is kind of a bummer for a couple of running backs that are on the team because there's so many of them, and we've kind of been waiting for Bentavious and stuff like that, and then we've got Johnny Richardson and a couple other guys, and he's bringing this guy with him from Auburn who will probably be the guy. I would be shocked if he's not. So I believe that one of them, though, is going to be a 1,000-yard rusher, and I believe one guy is going to get the majority of the carries. I don't think it's going to be huge multiple. Now there may be 2 or 3 guys that sometimes back there in the backfield, because he's done that as well, and he'll run the shotgun. I mean, he'll run the like a wildcat, wild knight. And all that stuff. So you may see different guys back there like that, but I believe one of them is going to get the majority of the carries.
Now, he likes to punish people. He'll punish throughout the game with the running game. He'll if he can, he'll put a hat on a hat when it comes to getting a fullback. He's constantly blocking somebody. And so what you've seen, or at least what I've seen in a lot of the games that he's been running, when he has a lead, right, he will punish you and just run and run and run and run and run. He started to do that at the end of the Peach Bowl for us when they started catching up. But he wants to punish people with his running backs to spring that second level.
Yeah.
So
so he may have a big guy and it may have a small guy as well, because he's got that here. These running backs are not the normal running backs that he's recruited.
Yep.
So he's got some guys that really fast and smaller. So it could be interesting. I think with this roster and he's recruited his own guys for the longest time. He was at Auburn for a long time, so there's nobody there that he just inherited. You know what I'm saying? For a long time. So he's got something different here. So we might see some new wrinkles. A big guy and a small guy. A big guy and a small, who knows?
Yeah,
so.
And we've been the most successful when we've had a 21 set. So if we run a 2-back set out of the backfield, he could very easily change up the veer style that he has and basically have a 3-headed monster, right? And he had 3 options, like an RPO that becomes more of a true option back, like traditional option that you saw with Army or Navy run or Georgia Tech or whatever. And he's done that before as well. So if
I would not be surprised to see something like that.
A smattering of it for sure.
Not as the base, but he'll throw weird stuff in there sometimes. So it's going to be exciting. Hang on.
Yeah, because I think he is going to adjust what he's doing. So as far as my hot take for this week, my hot take is that UCF football will hit top 50 in the recruiting rankings at the end of the current cycle. So what I'm saying is there's a Florida focus. He's got guys that know the area really well. Gus knows the Southeast really well. He knows he knows Central Florida really well. He actually recruited a lot out of Central Florida. So he's got a lot of relationships there. He's got a name brand, right? So he can sell a lot of these coaches and these recruits. And the narrative is you're coming here to win championships, not go to Pittsburgh and not even win an ACC championship, let alone go to a New Year's Six game, right? A lot of things that people forget, the playoff, right? There's only been 11 teams in the playoff. The entire existence of the playoff, there's only been 11 teams. So that means the other 64, quote-unquote, Power 5 teams have never played in that. And there's only one other game, which is the New Year's Six games, that someone can participate in. So the Pittsburghs of the world, Georgia Techs of the world, a lot of these guys that you see that are recruiting against us, they're never going to win a championship, let alone be able to play in the big light. So he actually has a platform to sell from. So I see him selling that hard, and it's just a different take on what our experience is. The narrative isn't, hey, You're not going to play in the playoff. This is what we're doing to help us get to the playoff. We're going to play these tougher teams. We're going to, work with Timo on the scheduling part of it. And at the same time, if we don't make the playoff, you're going to get the exposure that comes with that, especially if you're wanting to go to the NFL. And he's hitting up all these folks early and getting our name out there. What he's doing, folks, by offering all these 4 and 5 stars, he's making a point. We're here to play. We're here to win. We're not going to shrink away. We're going to compete with everybody, whether it be in recruiting, whether it be in the game, whether it be in the winning championships, whatever it is. And we're going to build this thing because you can win here, you can win a championship here, and you can spotlight yourself so that, and the undefeated seasons have proven that, so that when the NFL comes calling, you'll be ready.
Okay, take a breath, because you were getting excited there.
Super excited.
That was probably one of the most excited things that I've ever heard you talk about. So that was definitely a hot take. I mean, I agree with it, but it was still a hot take. All right.
My hands were going everywhere. You guys can't see this.
I know, but I was like, take a breath. Oh my God. I was waiting for you to like pass out on the floor or you fall off your chair. You'll thunk. That would have been Roger's head. Lord have mercy. All right. Next up here, real quick, a break, and then we'll be back to talk to Eric Lopez about the UCF softball team.
Raising the bar on what to expect from your personal injury attorney is our commitment to you at Chad Bar Law. I'm Chad Bar, and as a UCF alum, I am proud to present Knightline at Night, Central Florida's only call-in show dedicated to our UCF Knights, every Tuesday at 9 p.m. And remember, if you or a loved one are injured in an auto accident, call us at 407-599-9036 to schedule your free consultation or visit us at chadbarlaw.com. Offices Altamont Springs. Go Knights, charge on.
I'm Jeff Allen. Join me each and every week on the Knightline Sports Network for the AAC Report. We bring you in-depth coverage of each school in football, basketball, baseball, softball, soccer, golf, tennis, and more, as well as bring you insider interviews and focus in on the biggest games and news of the week. That's all right here each week on the AAC Report, only on the Knightline Sports Network.
Hey, Jeep Wrangler owners, have you ever sat in your office at work and watched the rain just pour into your Jeep because the weatherman said that there was a 0 chance of rain? Or you put your doors back on because there was a 100% chance and then not a drop of rain fell? Well, there's a company out there that can help take the worry away and give you the peace of mind to be without your doors. The company's called Life Without Doors. They make waterproof rain curtains and dash covers for Wranglers. Life Without Doors is there to help make the decision to leave the doors at home an easy one. Find out more at lifewithoutdoors.com.
Spice up your company with homemade marketing services from Tasty Gravy Creative. Tasty Gravy serves up a menu of budget-friendly marketing, graphic design, and public relations services customized to your specific goals. Co-owned by a UCF graduate, Tasty Gravy can help refresh your brand, strengthen your online presence, or reinforce your company's message. Contact Tasty Gravy for help with your website, social media, marketing, advertising materials, and more. Visit tastygravy.com.
All right, please welcome Eric Lopez to the show. Eric, it's been a long time, my friend. I'm so glad that you're back on here with us. Really appreciate it.
It's great to be back with you guys, and if I'm back on with you guys, it must mean softball season's here, so I'm even doubly happy about it.
Well, I mean, that is your thing more than anything else. Not that you don't know anything about the rest of the stuff. I'm not saying that. It's just softball is your thing. I couldn't think of anyone else that I would want to talk to about UCF softball. There's no reason to. It's been, I guess softball is kicked off. Kicked off maybe isn't the right word. I'm a football guy. So, but it's getting pretty exciting out there. I was really excited the very first game, I believe, to turn on ESPN Plus, which I love, and I've talked about it a lot on here, and hear your voice and watch UCF softball on ESPN Plus. That was so freaking cool.
It really was. It's exciting. I appreciate that. It's been great because we've gotten, I think, a lot of new fans that have tuned in and watched. I've gotten more like by social media. I've actually had to mute it during the broadcast because it's kind of blowing up. which is kind of getting used to. But it's been great. I mean, the production value has been gone up. And more people are tuning in. National people, like our Missouri game we just did lots of people. That was a national game because that was the best college softball game of the night on the schedule. So a lot of the casual softball fans that are not necessarily UCF fans but are softball fans are tuning into that because it's easy to go to ESPN Plus. As you and I know, we're both subscribers. It's all listed there. It's simple. And I think that's been a huge win for this program, for that exposure, as well as for all the UCF Olympic sports, for that matter.
Well, it also, and I think this is the part of this, there were some people that were upset about the ESPN Plus thing because, I have to pay $5 a month to have ESPN Plus to see some games. Well, yeah, but that is it's making huge changes to programs because if they do these quality broadcasts and get all their stuff out, like you mentioned, to people that maybe have never seen it before or never been able to see it, what about recruiting? I mean, it has to help. It has to build programs for recruiting.
Big time. I can tell you in talking to the coaches, it's a difference maker now because now you could tell your kid that you're recruiting, hey, we're on ESPN. We're on ESPN. Everybody, especially the young people today, Andrew, they watch more stream than they do actually, the actual TV.
Well, I'm an old person and I do.
Right. I mean, you and I, we're both watch the UFC, which is obviously really I would argue awesome. is huge for ESPN Plus. And then the boxing, I'm a big boxing guy. So it's big. And you're right. From a recruiting standpoint, everybody has the ESPN Plus. A lot of people use it as a bundle with Disney Plus and Hulu and get a deal. So it's really easy to get. And you're right. And what it does is it helps the other production. It helps the exposure. And we've been fortunate from a UCF standpoint. I mean, it was great to see our friend Ben Stout do a game there.
Absolutely.
Men's basketball do a great job with Austin Lyon. Guys like Michael Dono and Taylor Young, it gives them more exposure, more opportunities, and it's a great product for all the UCF athletics now when you see them at home in particular. So it's been a big difference maker. I can tell you, and for select games, I have a color analyst. I have Jamie Loprice, who's a former Texas A&M Aggie Women's College World Series participant who did the Missouri game. I'm going to have Francesca Aneo, who's a former 3-time All-American. And all that is because we're on ESPN Plus. That would not have happened if we were not on an ESPN Plus. So it is a huge game changer.
Yeah, I mean, it's huge, and the big thing was exposure that you mentioned there. And also, it's caused UCF to invest in its facilities and in its production, right? So it's not this is the first year out of the gate, but it's only going to get better. So more cameras, better camera angles, all of those kinds of things are going along with that. And watching these games, I mean, to me, it opens up a fan base. I actually went to softball games with my daughter quite frequently whenever I had an opportunity to do it. But I think it opens up the sport to a larger segment in the fan base, which hopefully will result in not just exposure, but also dollars pumped back into the program, because this program has, as you know, has been successful for a very long time, and it hasn't gotten really the dollars and investment that it really should. And, when you look at the stadium itself, and it's a great experience, but that program deserves more money invested into it to make that a premium experience that it puts out for the product that it puts out. So very happy for the team. Very happy for you, by the way. I've known you for a very long time. You've got a great voice. You've called the games for a very long time. And just to hear you on national TV, that's got to be a sense of accomplishment for you, because as you said, we've got this game that we recently played against Missouri, number 20 Missouri. Unfortunately, we dropped a close one to them. But that's even having that level of exposure has got to help the program some.
You're absolutely right, and it has meant a lot. Obviously, I've done this since 2007 when I was a student. When I first started, it was basically audio only. There was no video. So we've gone a long ways in that. But you're right, and I think you make a great point. I think it's going to get better. Keep in mind, currently, UCF and everybody in the American, they're in the process of trying to produce softball games, baseball, volleyball, men's soccer, if you have men's soccer, women's soccer, men's basketball, and women's basketball all at the same time, which is insane. And so we are limited with, and you have protocols you have to follow too. So we are, considering all that, We're doing a lot of good things. There's certain things that could be better, and I think it will get better, especially once we get back to a normal schedule in a normal spring, which, as you know, it means usually just baseball and softball and, basketball kind of coming to the end. We don't have usually to deal with soccer and volleyball production as well. So you're right. That's a huge thing that I think will get improved as time goes on and we move forward. But you're right. The exposure is huge, and it's a program. Think about it. This is the 20th season. We've only had 2 seasons where we had a losing season. We've been to the NCAA tournament, I think 7-8 times. We're currently in the top 25. But yet, you're right. It needs more support and it needs more renovations. Our stadium is 15 years old, and the one thing having gone through this protocols and this pandemic era, if you will, is it's kind of exposed. Hey, there's some things that need to be upgraded. And I think with the new athletic director Terry Mahajer on his list, one of the things I think is going to be at very high is the softball and baseball, which this, Roger, that scoreboard in baseball needs to be changed as well. That's kind of outdated. So John Giuliano has done a great job renovating baseball, but softball needs to be renovated. And I think some of those things should be at the top of the list.
Yeah, at one point they were going to use the old scoreboard from the football stadium before they built that gargantuan one. They were going to take that one and put it in the baseball stadium, I thought, but that never happened, I guess. All right. So tell us the big story about softball this year. What's the big story? There's always a big story at the beginning of the season. What is the story this year?
Well, it started to circle. It always does at UCF softball. Roger knows that pitching is the tradition. And Aaliyah White, who about a week ago became the all-time leader in wins in UCF softball, surpassing Shelby Turnier, who is the first All-American in program history, a legend, the most decorated player in program history. And Aaliyah broke that record. She's currently at 82 wins, having her off to a great start. And she's a fantastic story. She's a kid that was born premature. Was wears number 27 because they had to put oxygen on her for the first 27 days. Doctors didn't know if she would survive that.
That's awesome.
And not only did they thought they should have complications in her life, and she hasn't. The only complications, as I said on the air recently, was the complication she's given to the opponent's hitter. So she's a fantastic kid and a fantastic human story. I know UCF did a feature on, had I recommend that on social media, Sammy Kincaid did that. It's a really well-read that it's a very emotional story. So she's been a big story early on. And then the other story I would say is this offense, this UCF offense, which people that follow the program for a long time was always the kind of the Achilles heel or the question, can they score enough runs? This team can. They're averaging almost 9 runs a game. They're in the top 15 in a lot of the major offensive categories, top to bottom. They're explosive. You look at Saturday's win, everybody in the starting lineup had at least a hit. They can hit for power. They can hit for speed. They have a lot of versatility, and that comes from the head coach, Cindy Ball Malone, who brought that offense, and it's been dynamic so far to this point.
You talk a lot about Aaliyah White, and whenever you're talking about softball, you always need a 1-2 punch when it comes to pitching. So someone who's kind of stood out to me lately as well is Gianna Mancha. Can you talk a little bit about her and how important she is to the team? And really kind of the AAC itself is a really good softball league. People don't think about this because we all think about football and where we are in the organization of Division I football. But we have a really, really, really good softball league. So can you speak a little bit about Gianna and then also talk a little bit about where we are as a league in the hierarchy of softball?
Well, let's start with G. As you mentioned, I think you're right. She's very a wild card there. She's a strong number 2. She's coming off her best performance of the season, had 10 strikeouts, had a no-hitter with 2 outs in the 6th inning against McNeese on Friday night before it was broken up. But she's a valuable piece here. She pitched for Coach Ball Malone at Boise State when Coach Ball Malone was rebuilding this Boise State program that was at the bottom of the Mountain West. They won the Mountain West Championship in 2018, got to the NCAA tournament for the first time, and G was a big part of that. She was their ace, if you will. She threw, and that when she decided to come to UCF and transfer and join Coach Ball Malone, that was huge because with her and the second baseman, Justine Molina, they both came from Boise State. They bring that postseason success that a lot of the UCF players right now currently don't have because this UCF hasn't been to the NCAA tournament since 2016. They've kind of been on one of the first 4 out the last couple of years, so forth. And so this group really doesn't have that postseason experience that a Mancha and a Molina bring to this roster, which is it's a huge value there. So that's the value that she has. She can come out of the bullpen in relief. She can start. She's very, very big weapon. And I think she's the best number 2 pitcher in the American. And that's huge. You mentioned the American. It's a top 4, top 5 league. I think they're better than the Big Ten this year. South Florida has Georgina Korick, who's their All-American, 2-time American Conference Pitcher of the Year. They're the defending conference champions. Houston's always good. Tulsa has always been good. They got a new head coach that we don't know yet about, so they've got some questions. But this is a league that's always been competitive. 3 years ago, they were a number 4 rated conference in the entire sport. And they've kind of been in that 4 to 6 range in the rankings. And they had a team in Houston that was a win away from the Super Regionals 2 years ago. So this league is strong. I think UCF's the favorite, but South Florida is a team to be reckoned with. And I think that's the war on I-4 guys is probably going to decide the softball conference. But UCF's got bigger goals than that. They're looking to finish what they started last season, where they were in the top 25, 21-5. They believe they can go past. Get back to the tournament, get to a regional, and really make some noise.
Yeah, it was really sad how the season ended last year. There was a lot of momentum going into what would have been the conference tournament, and I truly believe that was a regional team. Can you speak a little bit? Last week, my hot take of the week was that this team will make it to a super regional. So what do you feel, or how strongly do you feel about their propensity to do that? I mean, they're on fire, playing with their hair on fire, as Gus Malzahn likes to say, for the first part of this season. How do you feel about their future and how far they can go?
I think it's very bright. I think if you ask them, their focus right now is just getting better every day. They're going to compete for the conference title. But I agree with you. The ceiling is high. You look at the state of Florida right now. Florida's a top 10 program. Tim Wall, they've always done it now for a while. You got Florida State, UCF. That's really – and then, you got those big 3, and then you got obviously the team in Tampa. So that's 4 big power programs. The big question, and you know this, Roger, having followed the sport, geography. In 2015, UCF was a top 15 team all year. They won the American Conference regular season. They won the tournament, and they got shafted out of hosting. They ended up getting bused to Tallahassee to play Florida State, even though they were a top 15 team in the country. And the reason was geography. And I think that's the one thing that is tricky about softball. Baseball has done a better job of rewarding teams, multiple teams in regions, than softball has. Baseball, for example, has had Florida host. They've had Stetson host, Miami host, FSU host. UCF's kind of been knocking on the door to host in the past. Softball, they've been very strict. It's been Florida and Florida State it's hosted. And so as a result, UCF has had to fight that. And that's my concern is, where is that regional going to be placed? What's the are they going to have to go to Florida State, or are they going to be able to host? And I think that will really play a long, long way in answering your question of, can this team get to a super regional? Because home field advantage in softball, and I know that fans are limited in things, but it's still a factor in softball and in the postseason. And if you're UCF to get to that super regional, it's a lot easier to host. But this team is capable of doing it because they have an offense and they've got a deep pitching staff.
So let's talk a little bit about, go back to that facilities conversation, right? So we talked about the need for investment in those facilities. Baseball did a lot of upgrades so that it could get into a position where it could host whenever we get back into that position again. Let's talk a little bit about softball. Can our facilities, would they be deemed high enough on the pecking order or developed enough to actually host a regional, or are we automatically out of that conversation?
We're not out of it. We could host because we have enough seating when you consider the bleachers in right field that they've added about, I would say, 5 years ago. They could even open the outfield. I think you've seen this, Roger. If you've seen when we've played Missouri even on Wednesday night, and we've seen it in the past against Florida State, they opened the outfield so fans could park in the outfield and watch the games. And they're doing this a little bit this year, because obviously they're limiting how many people can enter in the stands. So they're kind of encouraging people that, hey, those games, you can watch it from the outfield. And we've had a pretty good turnout on that. So they can host. They have lighting, which is good. But they have some things that go against them. For example, we don't have a visiting locker room. And this year in particular, that's been exposed because of the protocols. Teams now went, like we had a rain delay against New Mexico State. So New Mexico State literally left the premise because in the past they would hang out in the batting cage and that'd be fine. Well, you can't do that right now. So they literally had to leave. So that's a problem. That has to be addressed. The press box is very small. I've traveled. I've seen all the softball stadiums. I'm telling you guys, everybody is revamping. Everybody. And it's to the point now where a lot of the softball stadiums look like baseball stadiums with the space, the facility, all the things you have. And the reason is because the game is growing in popularity. More people are coming to softball games, attending softball games. So you got to give them a great experience. And that means facilities that people can be comfortable with and have a good experience in. And that's why a lot of softball programs are building stadiums that look like baseball stadiums now. And that's something I think is certainly something that I think hopefully UCF can address down the road. But it won't affect them as far as hosting a regional. It just kind of limits how many people maybe you could have in a softball regional where, a lot of these programs can pack the house and have 2,000, 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 people at regionals in some places. Right now, UCF cannot do that. They can reach the minimum. They can get what they need to do, but they're limited. And it goes back to what you said, Roger, about making revenue and money. You got to spend some money to get some money.
Yeah, absolutely. That's I know that is sure true. All right. So talk about the schedule a little bit and what's upcoming. I know there's some conference games towards the end of the schedule, obviously, but what's exciting that's coming up?
Well, let's start next week, Monday, March 8th. It is scheduled. Arizona, top 3 team in the country, is coming to UCF for the first time ever. Arizona, for those that don't know, they're like the New York Yankees of college softball. Mike Kendrea is the legendary head coach there, the winningest head coach of all time in college softball, 8-time national champion. That's a treat. I mean, I recommend if you're able to watch a game or even attend a game in the outfield or bleacher, however, that would be a game to pick, to see an Arizona that normally doesn't come down to the state of Florida. That is going to be huge momentum there. This year, for the first time in the 20 seasons, UCF and Florida are going to play a home and home. They will play at UCF March 24th and then go to Gainesville April 14th. They go to Old South Carolina for a 3-game series. They go to Ole Miss for a 3-game series. Coach Ball Malone, she has brought her philosophy. She wants to play a brutal, tough schedule. She is creative. Her background, obviously, in the Pac-12, where she was an assistant at Washington. This is the second year in a row she's been able to deliver a Power 5 Pac-12, a marquee Pac-12 team to come to the complex. Last year it was Washington when they were ranked number 1. This year it's Arizona. She's a creative scheduler. She added Missouri on short notice because she wants to test her team out, and she wants to host a regional, and she doesn't want the committee to give her an excuse of saying, well, you didn't play a tough enough schedule. And I think that's a big part of it. And she also wants to test her team to see what they've got in those games, because that's what you're going to deal with when you get to postseason. And then as far as the American, what's interesting this year of note, they're going to a 4-game series, the same in baseball. So they're going to play a 4-game series to make up for games that they lost and things like that. They're going to have to play a doubleheader during that Friday, Saturday, Sunday stretch that they play the series. So that's going to be an interesting element. The team's pitching depth will be tested. I think if you noticed this weekend, you saw that UCF started a freshman by the name of Grace Jewell against McNeese on Saturday. And part of that reason was to get her some reps and get her some experience, because they might need her in conference play with a 4-game series. So, and as her as a number 4, she did a solid job. So that's a big factor to look for. They host Houston. South Florida is who they close the regular season with. Again, South Florida has won the last 2 American Conference championships. When you go back to 18 and 19, they've got the reigning pitcher of the year in Georgina Corrick. And if you look at a storyline, Corrick versus Aaliyah White. That's a rivalry. I think one of those two will win the Pitcher of the Year award, and it might come down to that series as well as who wins that regular season title. So it's a challenging schedule, but an exciting schedule, and I think you'll learn a lot about this team as they develop, but they're deep, and they feel they can handle it.
So that March 8th, a Monday game, is at 3 p.m., is that correct, against Arizona? Is that That's kind of weird on a Monday at 3 p.m., right?
Yeah, it's one of those things, and I don't know all the specifics, but I think that's kind of because Arizona is going to spend the week in Florida. They're going to be playing in Tampa that Friday. I believe it's Friday through Sunday. It might be Saturday, Sunday. I don't remember offhand. But then they're going to play that Monday. Then they're going to bus all the way up to the Panhandle, right to where you're at, Roger, right by actually maybe further, by Tallahassee area, because they're going to play Florida State. So they wanted to get a head start from a bus standpoint. They didn't want to get caught late night in the deal there. I think that's part of it. So from what I understand.
Well, at least we're getting the number 3 team to come here and play, and a big team like Arizona, as you mentioned. I mean, that's good. So.
Yeah, Elo, unfortunately, I'm about 2 hours further west. So by the time I hit Tallahassee, I got about 2 hours to go. So I know that's a rough bus trip. Kind of talking about, scheduling, and it really brings up the idea of RPI and the philosophy behind RPI. Are we trying to insulate ourselves, because I believe this will be a multi-bid league this year. Are we trying to insulate ourselves from an RPI perspective just for the regional portion of it, or is it just to make sure that we have multi-bids in the tournament this year?
Yes to all of the above. I think it answers yes. I think the league, and I know I've talked to Coach Ball Malone, and I've talked to other coaches in the American. They want to challenge themselves to play a tough schedule to help the league, because that gets them opportunity to get marquee wins. You look at Houston. They just played Oklahoma recently at home. They're playing a home-and-home with Oklahoma. They're playing Texas. They're playing Texas A&M. They're taking care of business there. South Florida is doing the same thing. Tulsa's doing the same thing. And I think the league understands, let's play a tough schedule because we're capable of beating these teams. That makes our league look good, which means we makes it one of the tough, strong, and as a result, gives you opportunities to get more teams in. They want to get more than 2 teams. They want to get 3, 4, 5 teams in to the NCAA tournament. And by doing that, they got 4 in 18. And I think they feel they could do that by playing a tough schedule, winning those games, and then hope that if you're a UCF or whoever wins the league, you put yourself in position to host, kind of like in baseball with Cliff Godwin and what he's done with East Carolina. They've hosted regionals. Houston has hosted regionals in baseball. Baseball has done it the right way. I've always complimented what baseball has done in the American. I always felt that's the flagship sport in the American, because the top to bottom, they are strong, and they are always right behind the ACC and the SEC as far as the best conference in baseball. Greg Lovelady believes that they don't get enough respect in the baseball side. And I think it's the same sentiment over the softball side with Coach Ball Malone and UCF and Coach Vesely in Houston and Coach Erickson, who's the U.S. Olympic head coach this summer. So they believe they don't get the respect nationally. They believe they can do it on the field. They get those opportunities in softball, and they got to deliver in that. And they believe they could be a 3 to 4 bid league with the champion being in the mix to host a regional. So that's why they do what they do with the scheduling, and to help the RPI this year, because this year this is going to be a fascinating selection Sunday and how the committee figures all this out with the certain schedules adjusting, conferences like the Big Ten going conference only, Pac-12 and SEC playing non-conference games against each other. There's a lot to sort out, and I think the Americans doing a good job in the programs of trying to keep up with the big conferences to make sure they don't get shafted when it comes to Selection Sunday.
Yeah, I know Tulsa has always been a thorn in our side in conference play. That's always been in many sports, but more importantly in softball, there's been a lot of showdowns between us and Tulsa that talked about the conference tournament. So when we're looking forward and we're projecting forward, and now we're thinking about conference tournament mode, who do you feel are the teams to look out for and that are going to give UCF that might trip us up?
Well, it's funny you bring up Tulsa, because that's where the conference tournament is going to be at this year. So here we go. We're going to Tulsa, and you guys have known very well. You've addressed it on your shows, on the radio, on the podcast, how not much success UCF has had in Tulsa in all sports, coming with football, basketball, even this weekend with soccer and their struggles up there in Tulsa with the men and the women's team. So that's a tough place to play. I've been there a couple times. It's tricky because 1 minute it could be 80 degrees and blue skies and the wind blowing out, and then 5 minutes later we have a tornado warning, and then the next 10 minutes later we'll have like 30 degrees, and it's crazy. So they're tough. They're young. They have a new head coach. John Barfield left to be an assistant at Oklahoma State, so there's some questions about them. Obviously, the team in Tampa, they're the team to obviously be dealt with right at the top. As I mentioned, Georgina Korick is a phenomenal player. They know how to win. That's going to be a challenge there. Houston's very young in pitching, but they have a lot of good hitters. Wichita State has a dynamic offense. They are a sleeper team. They have been a thorn at UCF as well. And if they can get consistent pitching, I think they're a sleeper team in the American. So I think if you look at those 5 teams are competing for the NCAA. I think Memphis and East Carolina are still young and rebuilding. I'm not sure if they can go up at the top, but you never know. But I think those are the teams to watch for. It's a competitive field. I expect this to be at least a 3-bid league this year, and I think it'll play out that way. And it'll be interesting to see how UCF navigates through that. The big advantage is UCF's offense is as good as any, and they feel they have the deeper pitching staff in the league. They just got to prove it. And in a conference tournament, it's tricky because it's a single-game elimination. So if you have one bad day, you get knocked out. But that's where it's going to be. It's going to be at Tulsa. Hopefully they can get it through because we haven't had an American Conference championship completed since 2018 in Tampa, because even in 2019 in Houston, it got washed out. So they never completed that tournament. So we haven't had a conference tournament since 18. So let's hope we have one this year. Yeah. That'll be a good sign.
That's absolutely crazy. So that's just weird. I never would have even didn't dawn on me that it hasn't really happened since then.
Well, of course, this is the same sport, Angel. You remember I was on with you from Connecticut when we got snowed out.
That's true, yeah.
And it really ended up costing us the conference championship that year because of that, because we lost 2 games due to a snow out.
Yeah,
it's still a unique memory of mine. Thankfully, I don't have to worry about that again because Connecticut's not in the league anymore. But that's like the one episode. You guys just celebrated your big milestone. That's like my memory there, calling from Connecticut, telling you the weather as it was snowing.
All right. Well, there you go. Awesome. Thank you, by the way. That is a milestone, and I'm shocked that we made it there. But anyway, thank you very much for joining us, man. There's nobody that I would rather talk to about UCF softball. And UCF softball is very lucky, and the fans of UCF softball are very lucky as well to have such a passionate person that knows a lot about their school's softball team and can represent it as well as you do. So thank you for doing that, and thank you for coming on with us tonight. I really appreciate it.
I appreciate that a lot. And as Roger said, hopefully a lot of people follow this team. It's a great group of girls and a great talented team. I think it's going to have a fun year, an exciting year. It's an exciting product. Hopefully people check it out, either on ESPN Plus or wherever they can tune in and go out to a game. Go out to a game, take family. It's a great when we can. And I appreciate you always thinking of me, man, and promoting the sport of softball. That's the most important. I appreciate you guys doing that and spreading the word. And anytime you need me, I'm here for you.
Also, tell everybody where they can hear you or read anything that you write besides on ESPN Plus.
Eric Lopez Elo is probably the easiest way to do it on Twitter because I got a lot of different hats going on in my life right now, which is kind of fun, but yet stressful at the same time because I'm covering the NBA. I'm covering a lot of the UCF athletics, as you mentioned. So Eric Lopez Elo is the easiest way to find me there and see what I'm up to there. I got the National Softball Podcast in the Circle SB. If you want more info on softball, that's where you can go there. We do a podcast twice a week. Imagine that, twice a week, man. We've done this now 6 years, and you've helped out. You've actually been a big help on that because we've been doing live shows. We're doing a live show on Selection Sunday. You're a big part of that. You've helped us kind of behind the scenes kind of tell us how to do that. So I appreciate you helping out on that as well.
Awesome, man. All right, cool. Thank you very much, man. We enjoyed it, and we'll talk to you again soon, hopefully.
Anytime.
All righty. Softball, great to talk to Eric Lopez, by the way. I've always liked that guy. I just haven't had him on recently. So
certainly
does a great
knows
job.
His stuff, man.
Yeah, does an awesome job. All right, we have to talk about baseball a little bit. Kind of a big week for UCF baseball. It had kind of a shaky start getting going because Coach Lovelady had COVID the very first week of the season, so they had to play some games without him. But here is his press conference opening statement after the win against Ole Miss this week.
I'm really proud of the kids. Obviously take 2 out of 3, number 1 team in the country on the road in this environment. I think that's to be proud of no matter what, right? That's a huge accomplishment. But then to be able to take the series the way we did today, obviously a tough loss in game 1. And, I told the guys in between games, like, we can feel sorry for ourselves and we can be, keep our heads down and, our shoulders just that. You can just look like you give up and we go out there and just throw our gloves out there and get our butts whooped, or we can compete and fight like crazy. We still got a chance to win the series. We got to have short memories, and so proud of the kids the way they competed in that third game. And, we just battled. Obviously, A.J. Jones gave us a huge start. I mean, just big-time stuff. Obviously, gets out of that bases-loaded jam, which was huge. Ben McCabe gets the big home run to really get us going. And, A.J. going to throw up a couple zeros and Ben's home run. It just let them know that, we weren't here to roll over and die. We can say whatever we want about last week and all that kind of stuff, but we knew that that's not us. We knew that that wasn't our brand of baseball. And, the kids were pretty upset. And they came out today, want to make sure everybody, knew that we were still a great team. We're still a team that has a lot of things that they can do. And one weekend's not going to define us. And I'll tell kids too today, this isn't going to define us either. We're not going to look back and say this was the highlight of our year. We've already had the low point of our season, and we just got to keep moving forward, keep pushing the needle. But we're not going to look back at the end of the year and say, that second weekend was the best part of our season. We got a lot to prove, a lot to do. And I'm just proud of the way the kids came out this weekend, and, just was fun to be back in the dugout and be around them. And obviously winning's a lot of fun. So excited, grateful, and praise God.
All right. Well, I'm glad that he's back and he's good, healthy. The whole family sounds like they're healthy. So you follow baseball a lot more than I do. I really don't like baseball. It's one of my sports that I absolutely can't stand. It puts me to sleep. I know a lot of you are baseball fans, so we're going to talk about baseball. I'm going to let you do it, though. Run us through real quick how big of a deal this was to beat Mississippi State or Ole Miss.
This was
Ole Miss.
Yeah, this was a huge deal. I mean, I don't know if you remember last year, but we also swept Auburn for the first time in their history as an out-of-conference opponent at home. This is just as big and maybe even bigger because Ole Miss was ranked number 1 in the country after UF went down over the weekend as well. So we came this close. We were in the ninth inning, and we were up in the ninth inning to sweeping Ole Miss as well. So when you look at it from that perspective, and then to look at the previous games that we had played, the pitching looked lost. You could definitely tell Lovelady wasn't involved. The shifts for the defense weren't aligned right. So there were a lot of things that were going on that were playing against this team, and that had to be going in their heads when they, especially the pitching staff, when they went to Ole Miss, because this is the number 1 team in the country. And Colton Gordon had this in his head and had a terrible start last game, but came out firing. He went 7 innings, had 6 hits, and 1 earned run in his entire outing, and that really set the tone for the weekend. For the team, they played defense a lot better. One interesting note that was unique to the game that we watched, if you notice, the catchers themselves were using earpieces, and this is a trial period that the SEC and the AAC are both participating in, and since they're both participating in, this new rule this year allows them to use that. And if you look at the pitchers, they're actually using an armband, kind of like what quarterbacks use. So it was pretty interesting to see how that.
So what are they using the earpieces for?
They're actually sending signals into the catchers. So instead of using hand signals to communicate with them or other things, if you're Houston Astros, you get real interesting with that. But they're using the earpieces to talk to the catchers and also coach them. So what they're doing is they're coaching the pitchers through the catchers by doing that. So they're saying, hey, do this, do that, do this, communicate this to them.
Kind of like the NFL does with their quarterbacks and 1 offensive player and 1 defensive player. So it'd be interesting to see if we see that in college football at some point. An offensive player and a defensive player be able to have a radio in their headset.
Yeah, that would be, maybe the safety or middle linebacker and then the quarterback on the offensive side of the ball. Pitching was excellent. Colton Gordon rebounded really, really well. Saturday was a split, and it was kind of sad because we had the lead going into the ninth inning. We had an unfortunate set of circumstances. We had one guy who hit a home run. Then we let some guys get on base, and then what they termed as an error, but it really was an error by one of our freshman shortstops, and that allowed the go-ahead home run for that game. And Litchfield, he played really, really well during this game, and it's sad that he took the loss, but it ended up being 6-5 on a walk-off home run. And then game 2, we absolutely dominated. So this UCF team came out and won 7-2. A.J. Jones, who's a new pitcher, came out there, got out of a bases-loaded jam with a double play, forced a double play. He allowed 1 earned run and struck out 10 in 6 innings. And this is one of the top hitting on-base percentage teams in the entire country versus Ole Miss. Ben McCabe was huge. He was 3 for 4 with a double, a home run, and 2 RBIs in this game, and plated 4 runs. So this is his 4th home run for the season. If you remember on our preview, we were expecting big hits from them. And then Alex Freeland, who was also a big recruit for us, played extremely well. Just a couple of stats to say how big this is. UCF is 9-3 versus the SEC since 2018. 4-7 all-time versus Ole Miss, and 4-1 versus the number 1 team in the country when we play them. So huge stats there.
Awesome. And now, news and notes from the world of UCF sports. All right, men's soccer fell short to Tulsa, 3-1 on Saturday.
Women's basketball is tied with the Cows at 11-1 at the top of the conference after a dominating win against Temple at home, 61-37. The Knights used stifling defense to help them clip the Owls' wings.
All right, and UCF women's tennis lost to number 2 Texas, 0-4.
Number 19 UCF men's tennis, on the other hand, swept Florida Gulf Coast University 7-0 on Friday.
All right, UCF lost its first game of the season 8-1 on Friday, 2-3 at FSU after winning the first 2 sets in volleyball, by the way. Their games versus Miami were canceled.
And then women's golf finished 7th at the Lady Gator Invitational after leading day 1 and tying for 2nd at the end of day 2. They will next play in the Briars Creek Invitational in South Carolina March 15th, and they are ranked number 25 in the country.
All right, well, that was a little weird. I had all the losing ones. I don't like to just have the losing ones, but that's how it worked out. That was not intentional. All right, this has been Knightline 251. I'm Andrew Phegley.
And I'm Roger Phipps. Go Knights!
Charge on.
Onto the field, with our spirits we'll never yield. Black and gold charge right through the heart. Victory is our cry, B-S-E-T-O-R-Y tonight.